Hello, and thank you for coming to my presentation for Business 621 Contemporary Economic Issues. My name is Bill LaCava. Before we dive in, I wanted to give you guys a little bit of background about me. I have about 8 years of higher education experience, and I am currently the Assistant Dean for Residential Life Operations at Arkansas Tech University. I basically oversee facilities, guest services, assignments, purchasing, capital and capital improvement projects, as well as camps and conferences. So I have a lot on my plate, but I wanted to give you guys a little bit of experience while we're talking about the absent student and how this impacts not only myself, but also impacts higher education as a whole due to COVID. The article is from The Economist, the August edition, and it's talking about how COVID-19 will change college, either for the better or for the worse. So let's go in here and hit some of the main tasks. The main question this article presents is, can higher education survive COVID-19 while still using traditional methods? Traditional methods means in-person classes with a high number, especially for freshman classes, for like 100 people for the introduction courses, and start getting smaller and smaller groups while they get up in their degree. Some of the relevant topics that I discovered from this book is, from this article in our book, is Chapter 11, Human Capital, and Chapter 10 on the government and the economy. There's a lot of obstacles that the universities face because of COVID, and most of it is budget cuts. Budget cuts not only from state and federal, but also implemented budget cuts by the universities to try to save it. We'll talk more about the redistributing of fund that higher education has gotten due to government spending. Most of the issues that the article states that there are obstacles is enrollment. Enrollment right now, we have in-state, out-of-state, online, international. A lot of students are choosing to stay in-state, in their home state, while attending college. They're choosing not to travel, mainly because of COVID, but also because they want to stay close to the parents. Namely, some of the reasons is because of shutdown. They're worried the university is going to shut down, go fully online, kick all the students off campus, and go. Some students are already going to school online because their university shut down and went to a all virtual program. This is actually deterring a lot of students from attending because they paid for that college experience, that main university experience, getting away from their parents, living on their own, trying to figure out life themselves, trying to find people to relate with and talk with as well. One of the other obstacles that universities are facing is the cuts by the government. And actually, we're going to go into that a little bit more, and I'm going to try to explain some things about investing, the government's investing, and also why they're cutting. Before we go into why governments are turning on higher education, I wanted to talk about why they are investing in higher education. It's mainly to boost productivity by increasing human capital. Human capital, according to our textbooks, is each person's stock or skills for producing output or economic value. One major source of human capital is education attainment, and the other one is experience attainment as well. So the education attainment from the universities is helping produce more productive environment, more productive jobs, being able to do things and boost our economy. Basically, learn more to get a better job to boost the economy in the United States. The way the government invests is the tax dollars being distributed into different sections, different pies of how they're spending. Above me, directly above me, is the pie chart that explains this a little bit more. The pie chart here is 16% on the federal government side, on 10.4 in our book. I wanted to talk a little bit about the 16% in the income section, income security on there, because we're going to talk about that more a lot, not a lot, but quite a bit down the road here. But I want you to remember that 16%. I also want you to remember that 10% in health, because that 26% is how and what they're going to be redistributing from education. And if you see the state government is investing 27% into higher education, while 5% is getting invested in hospitals and 16% is getting invested in public welfare. So my question to you all and start this discussions is, why are they investing? Why are the governments stop investing in higher education? So the article lists these reasons here why the governments are starting to turn on higher education. A lot of politicians feel that 1/5 of the graduates would be better off never going to a university at all. This normally is about debt, and they feel like the debt of a degree to attain their degree is not worth the jobs that are coming out of it. Mainly because the labor market does not need those degrees anymore. And we being higher education, basically we supplied all these degrees, but there's no demand for the degrees anymore. I know myself, I went and got a biology degree. The demand was high for biology at the time. When I got out of college, there was no demand. There was no demand anymore, and there was too many people supplying. So my choices were either going back to school, or going to medical school, or becoming a substitute teacher. I ended up taking a lab job, and a substitute teacher job before going back to school, if you're wondering on that. That's not with this article. The other thing about them changing is just the different policies coming out from the administration, from the federal administration, from the state legislature as well. One of the big ones that hit this summer was about the foreign students or foreign exchange students. They weren't able to attend in person if they were only able to attend in person, not online. So if they were online students and staying in the states, they needed to be removed and sent back home. This hurt a lot of universities because they depend on the foreign students, especially graduates. The tuition rates are higher for foreign exchange students and also graduate students. We'll get more into tuition and fees here in a little bit. So the state governments have been redistributing the education fund for a while now, but most of the time it's redistributing it due to COVID lately. The COVID ones are mainly due to the income security and the healthcare. Income security is where unemployment falls, and healthcare, of course, is for the COVID-19 testings. So the COVID-19 testings were not free. The insurance companies or the hospitals, wherever you went to, charge back the insurance company. They still took your insurance information or so, or if not, they told governments how many people they tested and charged based off of that. That had to be made up somewhere. You can't just do profit for profit. So they charge someone, the government paid for it. And they will continue to pay for it as long as they say it will be free until the insurance companies take it off. Unemployment, if due to the fact that the state shut down jobs or shut down the businesses on that one, the states had to pay for the unemployment. Eventually, when they open them back up, the businesses would take on the burden of unemployment, but before then, the states had to take on it. So the 2 weeks to 2 months that businesses were shut down, the states were bailing out the unemployment. So that came from the education fund. My university is looking at to lose about $1.5 million just because of that time frame of when the businesses were shut down. From March to May, we were not getting our allocated fund of $1.5 million. Actually, next year we're still looking at, or got told that we're not going to get the $8 million we want to get from the state legislature. So we're looking at a shortcoming of already $8 million going into the budget. When we ran it, we were looking at a $15 million deficit. Some areas during recession, some states fund during the recessions, but other states do not and start cutting and slashing. This graph here shows you how much they actually cut and slash. So, what to do? Many universities are looking at this of what to do, and some of it is coming into the traditional sense. Most of the time, when there's a budget crisis, the first thing that universities look at is let's increase tuition or let's increase our fees. So this way that they can cover the offset of the budget gap. Sitting on the committee that I was on, we talked about different options. Actually, our institution implemented voluntary furloughs and early retirement. Those two looked like it was going to save the money, quite a bit of money. The voluntary furloughs, I don't know how many people actually took a voluntary furlough. I know maybe some of the faculty members might have, and some of the staff that were once essential personnel on our campus might have took it just so that they could be home with their families, especially since their families were might be very high risk on that one as well. One of the other things that we looked at was not filling positions. There is a lot of positions open on campus currently, and a lot of people are picking up the slack, and not filling those positions would save quite a bit of money. We're going to go into some position amounts from my university just to show you guys what we're talking about as well. One of the other things that was brought up was cutting our medical funding to our medical benefits and having employees pay for their own medical instead of the university putting it up as well. It's just something interesting. I thought it would be something cool to share you guys and see, so I'll show you what that looks like on there. One of the questions our division proposed is we're looking at a 5, 10, and 16%. To be honest, I think our university is looking at 16% total cut. We got to make up about $15 million for next year. But what will be lost by cutting is one of the questions that we have. So I'm going to go over my budget here pretty soon as well. Tuition, as I said, tuition costs always go up. But it's not really great that tuition goes up because it actually deters a lot of students from attending if tuition is too high. If you can see from this graph, the income median stays the same. It has stayed the same over the years up to 2013, but tuition rate keeps on increasing on there. And so we're making education not available for a lot of people because they can't pay, or students refuse to want to take out loans so they don't get into debt. Like I said before, I want to go over some tuition rates and fees just so you have a better understanding. If you could see in-state tuition and out-of-state tuition, out-of-state tuition is about double the cost of in-state tuition for undergraduates, and about the same for graduate and doctoral, but a $60 difference between undergraduate and graduate students. This is the way students actually make, the universities actually make money on that one. So the most a student will pay is probably around for 12 hours is looking about less than $3,000 in just tuition rate, and the fees get added on to that one. A lot of people decided to stay in state just to save cost on there. As you can see, it's double the cost to go out of state, so you might as well go in state. So some universities saw increases on there while others saw decreases. I know some of the local schools I talked to heavily rely on recruiting from Oklahoma and Texas versus us. We recruit heavily in Arkansas and a little bit in Memphis. That being said, we probably don't have as many students from Memphis and a lot more from Arkansas since they started to stay in state and want to be closer. They're mainly worried about universities shutting down and going online. Fees always confuse people, and I wanted to go over fees. If you increase a fee, more than likely you can never decrease it. So that's one of the factors that I'm always against increasing fees, is that you can't decrease it. Example of that is athletic student fee. If you get rid of that one, there's not a way to put it back on there. Our university, for example, is not having any sports at the moment, but that athletic fee pays for the stadiums, pays for the electrical going on in those areas, also pays for students, pays for the staff members that are in there. Coaches, staff personnel, athletic trainers are all from that athletic fee. So if students are not going to pay that, they're not doing it. It doesn't matter if there's athletics going on or not. One of the examples I use with my graduate students is you're still paying for a building. And it's been that way for a while. So I want to give you guys an example of what the budget cuts look like for higher education. So this is my budget. I did not make this up. This is my actual budget. We do about $11 million in expenses. On there, I normally make about $15 million. So I normally have about a $2 to $3 million profit on that one. Most of it goes back into investing into our buildings for capital improvements, and other part of it is to go into our reserves on there. Without tapping into the reserves, this is what I'm looking at doing for my budget cuts. A couple notes on here is the expenditures. $5 million here is for programming in the traditional sense. So these are your parties that the res halls used to throw, so like pizza parties, get-togethers, movie nights, pool tournaments, anything like that is in this, to hall elections, hall areas. So this is normally what we would love to have in there to make sure that the students are being well-rounded while in higher education, but it's also probably one of the first things that's going to be cut because it's not a necessary. I will argue that it will be, but a lot of people might not argue. The other one to cut would be student labor. We normally put in about $1 million in student labor to talk to them, to hire to run. These are the RAs, and right now we redefine the RAs definition. They still do rounds and all, but to reach out and do stuff with students, they're more doing it virtually this year than any other year. So my question to you is, looking at this budget, you might need to hit pause on my presentation here. What would you change on here? What would you cut on this? If you were thinking about cutting individual salary, I have here is one of my housekeepers' salaries. She gets paid about $21,000 or so. It costs me about $40,000 for her to be employed. That's because the rule is if it's under $25,000, we have to pay for their full medical. They cannot pay out of pocket for any of their medical expenses. So we pay for their full medical if they're under $25,000. So that's $19,000 that I have to invest for a $21,000 position. So if you're looking at cutting that, that's just something to be mindful of. And that's one of the reasons why we looked at cutting medical expenses. Actually, this is the main reason why we looked at cutting medical expenses, is because if they're making above $25,000, we don't have to put up all of the money up front for us to us being the university to pay for the medical. And if you actually see it, their medical actually decreases the more they come up here. So this is like if they paid if we paid fully 100% of their medical, which is what it was, it would make up that as well. So if we're cutting positions and all, that's where it is. But if we're saving positions by not hiring, so for example, if I hired another assistant dean, it would be about $80,000. So I could save about $80,000 by not hiring it. But that's why I have so much on my plate and doing so much more. So right now, the main question is, can higher education survive without doing the traditional methods? The answer is no. They need to change it up. One of the cool things that this article highlighted is the Big Ten Alliance. It's doing a lot of online learning within the Big Ten, so you can actually get lectures from different schools and actually the main professors and highlighted professors and go do more small groups with these well sought out professors, or the lectures with those well sought out professors, and then the individual professors from different departments or different divisions are teaching them. What do you all think? Can the university survive without the traditional method? And if so, what does that look like? And here is the list of my references. Thank you all.